She sat there quietly on the grass, her sketchbook resting on her knees, sunlight bouncing gently off her wheelchair. My daughter has always found comfort in nature, where birds don't judge and the wind doesn't whisper insults. It was one of those calm afternoons, the kind where you believe, even if just for a moment, that the world is still good. Until she came stomping down the sidewalk like she owned the earth beneath her feet. Karen. That's not her real name, but let's be honest, it fits. She didn't even look at me, just marched straight up to my daughter, eyes already narrowed like she was ready for a fight. "This isn't a playground," she snapped, glaring at the blanket we'd laid out. "What is this? Some kind of trash display?" And then the words that flipped something inside me forever. "You people need to stop leaving your lawn trash everywhere." My daughter's eyes dropped to her hands. Her lip trembled, but she didn't say a word. She didn't need to. I felt her heartbreak ripple through me like a scream underwater. I opened my mouth, but the rage was too thick to form words. Karen just sniffed and walked off like she'd cleaned up someone else's mess. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, replaying her words over and over. My daughter wasn't lawn trash. She was the reason I breathed. And Karen? She was about to learn that some battles are silent, until they hit like an earthquake. When we moved into the neighborhood, it felt like the fresh start we so desperately needed. After years of surgeries, therapy sessions, and quiet hospital rooms filled with beeping machines, I wanted to give my daughter something that felt like normal. A backyard with sunshine. A quiet street where she could roll down the sidewalk without fear. A place where her laughter didn't echo off sterile white walls, but instead danced through the trees and windows of a real home. I found the house on a whim, a foreclosure with good bones and a ramp already installed out front. It felt like a sign, like the world was finally saying, "Here, take a breath, you've earned this." My daughter, Ellie, was born with a rare condition that left her legs paralyzed by the time she was 3. But you'd never guess her life has been filled with pain by the way she smiles. She paints with the joy of someone who still believes in magic. She talks to flowers and names the birds in the trees. She doesn't see the world as broken. She sees it as waiting to be made beautiful. And I've done everything I can to protect that. Every sleepless night, every tear I've swallowed, every dollar scraped together, was so she could keep seeing the world that way. At first, the neighborhood seemed perfect. Quiet, well-kept lawns, neighbors who waved. I watched her sketching under the oak tree in our front yard, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I hadn't failed her. There were even moments when the sun hit her face just right, that I forgot about the pain that led us here. But peace, as we'd come to learn, is fragile. And not everyone welcomes innocence when it doesn't fit neatly into their idea of beauty. I had no idea then that behind those tidy hedges and smiling neighbors was a woman whose obsession with control would turn our dream into a quiet war. A woman who saw my daughter not as a human being with a soul, but as a disruption to her perfect picture. If I'd known what was coming, maybe I would have packed up and left before it got that far. But I didn't. And maybe it's better that way. Because staying meant giving my daughter something more than safety. It gave her justice. The first time I met her, she wore a pastel cardigan draped over her shoulders like she was visiting from some old money estate. Her hair was sculpted into the kind of perfection that only comes from hours in a salon chair, and her smile, tight, deliberate, never reached her eyes. She introduced herself as Marlene, but the way she emphasized her position on the HOA board made it clear that was the identity she valued most. I remember she brought over a welcome brochure filled with neighborhood rules, font size 12, printed in color, stapled at the corner like an official government document. She called it a friendly gesture. but I could already hear the sharp edges underneath her words. At first, it was small things. A note taped to our mailbox about the visibility of the wheelchair ramp. A casual comment at the mailbox about keeping the aesthetics uniform. She never said anything outright cruel, but every word was laced with judgment. It wasn't long before her comments evolved into complaints. She didn't like the way Ellie's art supplies were arranged on the porch. Said it looked cluttered. The sound of her wheelchair wheels on the driveway apparently disrupted the morning ambience. Once, Ellie left a pastel drawing of a bluebird hanging on our fence. Marlene knocked on our door, holding it with 2 fingers like it was a dirty tissue, and said, "This sort of display lowers property values." She didn't see Ellie. She saw an eyesore, a disruption, something to be corrected, hidden, removed. I tried to brush it off at first. I figured maybe she was just one of those people who needed something to control, and we'd be old news soon enough. But it didn't stop. If anything, it got worse. She began attending HOA meetings with a folder labeled with our address. I heard her refer to Ellie's outdoor setup as non-compliant. She took photos of our yard, of Ellie. I caught her once, standing across the street, snapping pictures like she was building a case file. I kept trying to play nice. Smile, nod, stay calm. For Ellie's sake. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just a woman protecting her neighborhood. This was someone who needed to remind us every single day that we didn't belong. Not in her perfect world. It was a Sunday afternoon, one of those perfect early spring days when the sun rests just right on your skin, and the breeze carries the scent of blooming flowers. Ellie had set up her little art station beneath the tree in our front yard. Sketchpad, watercolors, her favorite cup of brushes. She wore her pink sun hat, the one with the ribbon that always slips into her eyes, and hummed while she worked, completely at peace. I was inside, watching from the living room window, sipping coffee and thinking how lucky I was to witness that kind of joy. For a moment it felt like we'd finally found our place in the world. Then I saw her, Marlene, striding down the sidewalk, like she had a personal vendetta against sunshine. Her mouth was already twisted into a scowl, her arms crossed, clipboard in hand. I stood up, moved closer to the window, already feeling that pit in my stomach tighten. Ellie didn't notice at first. She was too lost in her painting. But when Marlene stopped in front of our yard and cleared her throat with exaggerated disdain, Ellie looked up, her smile still warm, innocent. "What is all this junk?" Marlene snapped. "You've cluttered the entire lawn with this mess. Do you not understand the community guidelines?" She gestured wildly at the blanket, the scattered paint tubes, even Ellie's wheelchair bag that lay beside her. Ellie fumbled, trying to gather her things, confused and startled. And then Marlene said it. She looked down at my daughter with disgust and muttered, "Honestly, it looks like lawn trash." I froze. My breath caught. I couldn't believe I heard it right. But Ellie did. Her hands stopped moving. Her face changed. That light in her eyes, the one she always carried even on her worst days, it dimmed in an instant. She looked down at her lap, lips pressed tight, and the brush slipped from her fingers. I rushed out the door, heart pounding. "Excuse me?" I said, louder than I'd meant to. Marlene turned slowly, calm as ever, like I was the one causing the problem. "This is a neighborhood," she said, smug. "Not an art class for special needs charity cases." I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just stared at her, feeling something crack open inside me. Something deeper than anger. A promise, maybe. One I didn't even say out loud, but I felt it in my bones. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next morning I was at the HOA office as soon as it opened. I wasn't shaking with rage anymore. I was focused, calm, composed. The kind of calm you only get when something inside you has settled into resolve. I brought pictures of Ellie's setup, notes I'd taken, and I filed an official complaint against Marlene for harassment and discrimination. The woman at the front desk smiled politely, took the papers, and told me the board would review them at the next meeting. That meeting was nearly a month away. I didn't wait. I attended the next meeting in person, sat through 30 minutes of budget talk and dog park drama before they finally brought up my complaint. Marlene sat at the head of the table, smug and unreadable, like she knew what was coming. When I spoke, I laid it all out, her verbal attack, her pattern of harassment, how Ellie was singled out. I expected at least one board member to show concern. Instead, I got nods, stiff faces, and a few raised eyebrows. And then came the bombshell. Marlene interrupted, claiming she'd simply asked my daughter to comply with the neighborhood's guidelines on yard presentation. She waved her clipboard in the air as proof, citing a subsection about outdoor displays, temporary setups, and items left on lawns that may reduce visual harmony. They sided with her. Not a warning, not a discussion about appropriate conduct. Just a recommendation that I ensure future outdoor activities follow the established code. I left the meeting stunned. It wasn't just Marlene. The entire board had either bought into her version of the story or simply didn't care. I'd thought the HOA existed to protect residents, to keep things fair and neighborly. But now I saw it clearly. It was her kingdom, and they were all just figures on her chessboard. I called a lawyer. He was sympathetic, but honest. Unless there was a clear legal violation or a pattern that crossed into provable discrimination, there wasn't much to be done. These HOA agreements, I learned, were airtight, built on vague language, hidden clauses, and just enough legal cover to dodge accountability. We were trapped. But I wasn't giving up. If the front door was locked, I'd find another way in. Marlene had made the mistake of thinking I was weak, that my daughter's silence meant surrender. What she didn't know was that I'd stopped trying to play by her rules. I was learning to play by mine. It happened by accident. One of those quiet discoveries that starts as a whisper in the back of your mind and grows louder the more you look. I was walking past the community bulletin board outside the HOA clubhouse when I noticed a small stack of notices tucked into the corner, mostly overlooked by the dog-walking crowd. One caught my eye. It was an official-looking envelope, slightly wrinkled, addressed to Marlene's house. Normally, I'd never read someone else's business, but the envelope was half open, and what I saw made me pause. It was a lien notice from the county. Property taxes delinquent, 3 quarters behind. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe there was another Marlene on our street. But the address was hers. No question. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Curiosity, sure, but also something darker. A flicker of opportunity. That night, I went online and started digging. Property records, court filings, anything public. And there it was. Page after page of overdue balances, citations, and HOA fines that she herself had likely waived or ignored. For all her strictness and superiority, Marlene was underwater, drowning in debt. And her home. It was scheduled for a tax auction in less than 90 days. I sat back in my chair, stunned. Of all the people, Marlene, the queen of HOA perfection, was about to lose the very house she had used as a throne to humiliate others. It was poetic. The more I read, the clearer it became. She wasn't just mean. She was scared, cornered. And everything she had used to make others feel small was crumbling beneath her. I didn't celebrate. Not right away. I just closed my laptop and stared into the dark room. The hum of the refrigerator the only sound. This wasn't just gossip or petty revenge anymore. This was a door opening. A real one. A legal one. Ellie was asleep in her room, her art taped to the walls, soft music playing from the little speaker she loved. I walked in, kissed her forehead and whispered, "We're going to be okay." I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew I wasn't powerless anymore. And Karen, Marlene, had no idea the storm that was quietly gathering right beneath her polished shoes. For days, I walked around with the weight of a secret stitched into my chest. I didn't tell Ellie, of course. She had started painting again, slowly, hesitantly, mostly inside now. She didn't like being out front anymore. I hated that. I hated that her joy had been pushed indoors because of one woman's cruelty. And every time I saw that empty yard, I remembered the way Marlene had looked at her, like she was something to clean up. That memory kept my focus razor sharp. I met with a financial advisor first. I didn't want to jump in blindly, not with something this serious. I learned what I needed, how property auctions worked, what cash I would need up front, how to prepare for possible counterbids. I even learned that sometimes previous owners try to pay off their debts at the last minute, so nothing was guaranteed. But still, the window was open, and that was all I needed. Every night after Ellie went to bed, I researched, I saved. I moved money around carefully, sold off a few things I didn't need. My old motorcycle, some vintage gear I hadn't touched in years. This wasn't about revenge for the sake of spite. This was justice. A message, loud and clear, that you don't get to step on people and walk away untouched. There were moments I hesitated, times when I questioned whether this made me just like her. But those doubts didn't last, because I wasn't trying to hurt her for fun. I wasn't trying to destroy her peace. I was giving her a taste of the consequences she thought she was too privileged to face. And more importantly, I was reclaiming something for my daughter, a sense of safety, of power, of dignity. I confided in my brother eventually. He's a lawyer, and while he didn't say much, he gave me a nod that told me he understood. He'd seen how broken Ellie had been that day. He knew this wasn't just about property. Every move I made felt slow, methodical, surgical. I was careful not to raise attention. I never spoke about it publicly. Never let a word slip at HOA meetings. Let her keep thinking she was untouchable. She had no idea her kingdom was for sale, and I was getting ready to buy it, brick by smug brick. The morning of the auction, my hands trembled as I tied my shoes. It wasn't fear, it was the weight of months of planning, silence and self-control, all coming to a head in one final move. I hadn't told anyone except my brother, and even he hadn't asked questions. He just sent me a one-line text that morning. Time to finish it. I drove to the courthouse early. The building was colder than I expected, all grey stone and fluorescent lighting. A few people were already gathered, property investors mostly, the kind who bid on houses like they're poker chips. I kept to myself, clutching the envelope that held everything I needed. Cashier's checks, proof of funds, documentation. My heart pounded with every step, every moment dragging out like it was daring me to walk away. But I didn't. When the auctioneer called Marlene's address, my breath caught in my throat. The opening bid was low, shockingly low. Maybe people assumed the house had hidden problems. Maybe they sensed the drama behind it. Either way, only one other bidder raised a hand. I countered. He raised again, half-heartedly. I matched it, and just like that, he shrugged and stepped back. The gavel hit the table. Sold. I stood there, numb, the papers in my hands suddenly heavier than anything I'd ever carried. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't celebrating. I just felt this quiet surge of something deeper. Justice. The kind that doesn't yell or gloat. The kind that simply arrives and settles in your bones like truth. Marlene didn't know yet, but the house that once made her feel powerful, the one from which she judged, mocked, and bullied a little girl trying to enjoy a sunny day didn't belong to her anymore. It belonged to the very people she tried to push out. As I walked out of the courthouse, the sun was rising just a little higher. I took a deep breath, feeling its warmth on my face. For the first time in months, it felt like the light belonged to us again. She didn't find out right away. There's a process, paperwork, notices, and legal steps that slowly close in like a noose she never saw coming. But when the official letter arrived at her door, informing her of the sale and her deadline to vacate, the scream that followed could be heard across the street. I was in my kitchen when I heard the knock. It wasn't polite or hesitant. It was furious, rapid, sharp, demanding attention. I opened the door slowly, already knowing who it would be. Marlene stood there, face flushed, eyes wild. She didn't even wait for me to speak. "You," she spat, pointing a trembling finger. "You bought my house? Are you insane? This is illegal." I didn't blink. "It's perfectly legal," I said, calm and steady. "You missed your tax payments. It went to public auction. I followed every rule, something you seem to care a lot about." She was shaking, clutching the edge of her clipboard like it might anchor her to the past she was desperately trying to hold on to. "This is harassment. You targeted me. I'll have you thrown out." "No," I said, stepping forward just enough to make her pause. "You targeted a child. You called my daughter trash. You mocked her for being disabled. And you did it while standing on a lawn you don't even own anymore." Her jaw opened, then closed again. The power she had always wielded with her voice, her rules, her threats, it was gone. She didn't know how to exist without it. "You have 30 days to move out," I said, handing her a printed notice. "And if you harass me or my daughter again, I'll file for a restraining order." She snatched the paper from my hand and stormed off without another word. A week later, a moving truck showed up. I didn't watch her go. I stayed inside with Ellie, helping her hang one of her new paintings on the wall. The house felt lighter, safer. In the weeks that followed, I let Ellie decide what we should do with the place. She wanted to turn it into a community art space, somewhere kids like her could paint and be seen without judgment. So we did. And the front lawn? It's filled with color now. Not clutter, not trash, just freedom. Sometimes justice doesn't come in the form of a courtroom or a dramatic apology. Sometimes it's quiet. It's watching your daughter smile again in a place where she once cried. It's hearing her laughter echo through the same walls that once held scorn. It's seeing her paint in the front yard without fear, without shame, knowing no one will ever call her less than human again. That's the kind of justice we earned. I didn't buy that house out of hatred. I bought it because I refused to let cruelty win. Because when someone tries to break your spirit, especially your child's, you don't just walk away. You rebuild, brick by brick, even if that means taking back the very ground they used against you. I didn't fight fire with fire. I fought it with resolve, with patience, with truth. The neighborhood's changed, or maybe it hasn't. Maybe we're just louder now. Our joy, our resilience, our right to belong. Ellie's art center has brought life to the street. Children gather, they laugh, they create. No more hiding. No more permission needed to simply exist. If you've ever been made to feel small, unwanted, or out of place because of who you are or someone you love, know this. You're not powerless. You're not alone. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something beautiful where ugliness once stood. Marlene called my daughter lawn trash, but today, that lawn is hers, and it blooms.